Welcome to Ripstop on the Record, the podcast for makers, by makers, where we talk about all things MYOG. Brought to you by Ripstop by the Roll. I think it's good, right?
Yeah, I think that was a good take.
Hey everyone, this is Ripstop on the Record, and I'm Jameson. In this episode, we are chatting with gear legend and ultimate humble guy, Dan Durston. Since we last talked, he has released a pack, a tent, trekking poles, tent poles, and managed some good old-fashioned Reddit beef. We talked about all of that, as well as what Dan likes about ALUULA materials, what makes Durston gear stand out probably more than anyone else's, and what material Dan thinks maybe isn't quite ready for the limelight yet. All of that in just a minute. Have you checked out RVX15 yet? Well, what are you waiting for? This is a top material that we custom wove with the good people over at Dimension Polyant. In fact, I've got 2 yards waiting for me in the makerspace right now, printed in custom colors that are going to be turned into a new pack here pretty soon. They are, well, chef's kiss. Plus, I'm kind of a sucker for the X-Ply. Just me, maybe, but I'm really stoked about it. So go look at RVX15, as well as all the colors that you can print on that material. Last thing, if you're an MYOGer, then you know the feeling of when somebody compliments your new project. It's amazing, right? Something that you made got someone's attention and they like it. Well, that's how it feels for us when we get a rating or review. If you want to make our day and help other people to find the podcast, then make sure you subscribe and leave a rating, pretty please. It would mean a lot to us. We see every single one. All right, we're not going to use too much time because this is a husky-sized episode with Dan. We hope you enjoy it. Let us know. And yeah, shout out to Dan. Dan, it's been nearly 1,100 days since we last talked. The first episode with you came out in June of 2022. So first of all, welcome back to the episode, or to the podcast in general, but also give us some milestones of what's happened for you since then.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. 3 years. Holy smokes. That when we talked last, that was a crazy time for us because June 2022, there's like a whole drama background to like our company and stuff. But yeah, a lot of drama there. But what was actually happening at that time was we were just launching our Dyneema tent, so the X-Mid Pro. We had done a pre-sale in January 2022, and then we're like, this is the first time like actually executing on a product, like myself, not just sort of licensing a design to somebody else, but like actually doing it. So we had promised everybody that we were going to deliver these tents, but we didn't really know when. So it was like we gave a window. It was like sometime between like May and September. So it was like 5-month window. So we were into that window when we talked last, and I was under the gun. Like I had remortgaged my house to like pay for fabric. And we had like, COVID was still happening. Like we were like, the factory's like, we're going to make your stuff. And then it's like, oh, we're like COVID closure. Like so much drama back then. To have all that at the first time ever doing something was so stressful. We did pull it off. We kind of hit the tail end of the window. So that was good. In late 2022, we got them shipped out like the last week of summer, so people could do a little camping with them. And then since then, we've done a whole bunch of stuff. We've like updated our X-Mid tents that we're best known for, and we've got a couple new backpacks. I think our Kakwa, our main backpack, was just coming out that year, and then our frameless ALUULA backpack was the year after. We also done our trekking poles, the ice lines, and then the big thing this year has been our freestanding tents, the X Dome. So it's not a lot of products, but they're all like huge projects. So that's been a lot for me, a lot of stress and busyness. I got gray hairs now. I didn't have these when we last talked. Yeah. So that's my life.
This next question might be a loaded one because you've come out with so many great products since we've talked last. But out of all the products you've worked on in that time, what was the hardest to refine?
I'm learning so much because I come at it like, I think I come from a background like a lot of your listeners where I just started like making stuff. I started making like on a pink $20 sewing machine. It was like, I got half price at Michael's craft store for $20, and then I'm just sort of learning. So as you learn more and more, you learn. One thing I've come to know is that there is sort of I don't want to say this in a negative way, but like a kind of a naivety when you're just making like one of something, because if you make something for yourself, you're going to kind of take care of it. You're going to, so if you know a spot's not that strong, you maybe a little gentle with that area. Or if you're a brand that's making like a small batch, it's still like you don't see the edge cases where somebody might do some weird thing or something like that. But we've gotten to like a point where we hit a pretty general audience. So then now it's like just any little vulnerability, any little slightly weak spot, somebody's going to yank on it. Somebody's dog's going to chew on it. So anyways, everything feels hard, partly for that reason. And partly because all the products we make, I feel like we should make easier products, but all the products we make are what I would call is actively stressed. It's like a backpack. It's like bouncing along every step of the way. It's getting yanked and stressed. Like it doesn't live an easy life. And the same is true with a tent or a trekking pole. Like they're all like actively being stressed whenever they're in use. And when people hike some big trail like the PCT, they're like in use like a lot. So I'm like jealous of companies that make like chill products, like a sleeping bag. Just sort of sits there. If it blows a seam, it's like, whatever, we'll put a piece of tape on it. But it's not like nobody's sort of dying or anything like that. So generally, all of our products feel kind of hard because due to the volume and due to the active sort of stress life that they live, any weakness is going to get exposed. Generally, I feel like backpacks are the hardest just because they're used in so many ways. And they like on the PCT, they are like 12 hours a day bouncing along, rubbing and chafing, and like any little thing's going to get exposed. So it's not like hard to like conceive of the backpack and how you're going to make it, but to actually have all the little kinks sorted out is really hard. And so backpacks in general would be the hardest, but for one specific product, I think it's our X-Dome tent, because again, I come at this as just like an enthusiast who's just like crap, I got to learn this topic. Like I'm going to make a freestanding tent. Okay. Like I've never made a freestanding tent. The trekking pole tents that we were doing, they're all like flat shapes. It's all flat triangles that you can draw it really easily because you're just like, the height and the width, and here's the hypotenuse, and you can calculate it up easy. But then you're into like curves with like variable radiuses, and you're like, what's the length of that like fabric edge? So anyways, there's a deep learning curve on the freestanding tent. And so that one, partly just due to the complexities of freestanding tents and partly due to just that I didn't really know the core concept was pretty fluid for a long time. So you sort of get it and then you change everything. And like we put a crossbar in to give more headroom, which like completely changes every panel on the thing. So you're like, okay, like, now we had all stress points solved and now we maybe made them again. So yeah, the X-Dome has been hard, but packs as a general thing are a hard thing to really dial.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people will be able to relate to that who might be designing for themselves or for other people, because that's just, not only are you building something that is high stress, like you were mentioning, but also with something like a tent, it's your most life-saving piece of gear that you have as well. So there's a lot of stress just probably mentally in that, as well as the physical stress that a tent might take. Do you think of yourself as a world-class designer now, or what do you credit the continued success of Durston to?
Yeah. When I think of a world-class designer, what I think a designer is sort of not like me, because when I think of a designer, I think of somebody who's like a total ninja at making stuff. So they know like they can sew awesome. They know all their fabrics. They know how to like, sew and 3D bond and pattern and like have perfect drape, and how to like draw it up in 3 dimensions and make tech packs for factories. And, here's the technical seam allowances and things like that. And I'm okay at that stuff, but I'm all like self-taught and not that good. So I think I'm sort of a B or a C in kind of all those categories. Like I can sew, but not that great. And I can draw stuff, but it takes me forever and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think of myself as a world-class designer. I do think that we have some amazing partner factories that help us with some of like the technical stuff like that I don't really have. Like I could sew a sample, or I could send a drawing pack and they make it like perfectly, which is just like works so much better. I feel like what I contribute is a big part of it's just the vision for the product. I'm a user, just a geek, just a giant gear geek. And I'm just thinking about like, how do I want it to work? Where are we going to end up? Very much from like a user perspective of what would work for me. So I bring a lot of field experience to know when something works, and I know when I like it. So I feel like we're sort of the opposite of a traditional company. Probably has designers that are really good at making stuff, but maybe are less connected to the user and like really what they should be making. And we're sort of the opposite, where we're like, we really know what we want to end up with from a user perspective, but we're like, but how do we make that? So that's where partly our partner factors really help with, and partly the community. We're really appreciative of the amazing people. Like we have a lot of people in our like Facebook group and things like that, and just users in general. We get so much email suggestions. So we try to make something great, and then we try to not be like, oh, we make perfect stuff. Like we never needs to change because like it's perfect. It's like, no, we're very open to feedback and changing, and we're always changing our stuff to just be better.
Something that we see a lot of in the MYOG world is when you're able to design gear yourself, or when somebody has a vision for a piece of gear, it typically becomes hyper customized. Like the gear that you see somebody make all entirely for themselves, it has like this pocket for this specific pen and like all these things that are just so customized to them. But you've been able to take these personal ideas, but synthesize them into like really ubiquitously appreciated pieces of gear. How do you feel like you've narrowed that down? Because if I was thinking about making I have made it like my favorite backpacks, I don't know if they're things that everybody else would want in the same way that your gear has been.
Yeah, I think some of that comes from making the wrong stuff. I know I've made a bunch of backpacks. Like before we had a gear company, I made a bunch of backpacks, and I've done both ends of the spectrum. So there's sort of a spectrum of specific versus generalist. And like, are you making it exactly for something, or making it like good for everything?
Sure.
And I've done both. I've made backpacks and other gear where I'm trying to make it good for everything. So it might be a backpack that's good for like backpacking, but it's also for ski touring. And there's like a way to put your shovel on it. And I've found that both ends of the spectrum have some problems, because you do want it to have a coherent vision and use case. It can't just sort of be like, we're making, like, you'll see these travel backpacks that are like the one backpack for like, you know, everything from like climbing Everest to like going down the New York subway or something. And you're like, yeah, like it's not good at anything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's hyper specialized, it also suffers because it's so niche. Like people need to have a backpack for everything. And it's sort of, you kind of get fatigued of like trying to make, like, this is my backpack for one nighters. This is my backpack for three nighters. This is my backpack like in the fall. And it's like, yeah, like it's kind of exhausting too. So a big thing for me is having a vision that I think is on a sweet spot on the spectrum. So I really try to keep this is what I would encourage for everybody, is really have a vision. Don't be like adding stuff along the way where you're sort of, oh, maybe that'd be cool if I did this, maybe cool if I did that. And you can keep adding stuff, but it's everything that you do has to be judged against sort of this master vision that you have for that product. So we're not formal about it. Like I'm not like writing up like a business plan for our products and like 80% of hikers, this satisfies 32% of their trips or something like that. But I am saying like, this is just intuitively, I know what the use case is at a level of specificity that I've sort of arrived at through experience of what I think is kind of a sweet spot on generalist versus specialist. And then everything is judged against that.
That's really helpful. It actually segues into the next question I was going to ask really well. And that seems like it would be a really good design principle or theory. And that's kind of where this question goes, is over the years, you've released 4 backpacks, 3 or so tents, give or take, I guess 4 tents, if you want to take the 1 and the 2 of the X-Mid and the X Dome. What are some other design principles that you feel like you kind of carry with you now after having more gear design experience?
Yeah. So there's kind of 3 main ones that I think guide what we do. The first one I've sort of just talked about that coherent vision. And that is when you make your design, and it's also as the product continues to evolve. So when we get all sorts of feedback and we appreciate and are open to that feedback, but it all has to be judged against the vision, because if it's just each individually, like people are always going to want more features. Add this, add this, add this. If you just like listen to all of it, you're going to end up right back with this overcomplicated, bloated product. Even if any one thing, if there's 10 ideas and they're all good, but you say yes to all 10, it's still a problem. So having a coherent vision from the outset of what you're going to use it for is really important. And then part of that, so I call this coherent design, and part of that's the vision, but the other part of it is more practical. And that is I really feel like design is trade-off. So it's weird. You see this marketing in a lot of industry where it says no compromises or no trade-offs. And I'm just like, I just think it's so wrong. I feel like somebody in marketing, like, it sounds cool, right? Like, we didn't compromise anything. And you're like, yeah, but it's not like the world is compromise and trade-offs. It's like right now we're all spending our time on this podcast and not on something else because, you know, we've made that trade-off because we think it's valuable. And everything, what you spend your money on, you're not spending something else. And for design, it's the same thing. Like, the lightest material might be good. It's not going to be like more durable than like something that's way heavier. So I am in design. There's all these things where we don't say we don't make any trade-offs. We say we kind of compromise consistently or coherently. And that means I'm not going to put like a way overkill zipper. Like, there's some sleeping bags that are like super light, delicate nylon. And then they have like this giant zipper. And you're just like, well, the zipper is like double the weight of what it needs to be. Like, it's not consistent. And I think that's the core message, is that you're going to compromise, but what you should do is compromise consistently. And that way you end up with a coherent product. So every aspect of it is about the same position on the different spectrums, like the durability versus weight, or on the like more versus less features, or the generalist versus specialist. All those trade-off axes you're trying to be consistent on. So you might be, if you're trying to make a really durable pack, then great, like make the whole thing durable, but don't like make a really durable pack with a tiny little zipper on it or something that's going to blow out. So I feel like that is an important one, is this compromise consistently, and recognize that we do make compromises. And then the other big thing that we talk about, it's a little murky to explain, but we call this our first principles design. It sounds kind of like a tagline. So I'll try to explain what I mean, but what I mean by first principles really is just that we are willing to question everything from like the basics. It's not that we're going to like try to be weird. I think what you're going to see typically in most design is they're going to take kind of what's the dominant form in the market, and then they're going to evolve it from there. Whether it's a tent or it's a backpack, it's sort of, here's the dominant design, and then, you know, make it a little taller or wider, or we're going to like add this, add that, but it's all sort of iterating on kind of a dominant design. And we do that, of course we do that too, but we try to dig a little deeper before we do that and like make sure there's a good reason why it's the dominant design, and we question every aspect of it. So I was just thinking of this last night to give an example. So for an example I just thought of last night was canister stoves. We're not making one. I have no sort of, that sounds like a terrifying thing to try to make. But when you think about a canister stove, there's core things that are kind of always the same. Like, it's going to have threads that screw into the canister. It's going to have a little like jet head thing in the middle, a couple of folding fins to support the pot. There's the jet boils and stuff, but just aside from those, like the basic ones. And then there's probably a turn throttle on the side. And then a lot of them are basically just iterating off those variables. Is it 3 or 4 legs? Is it a bigger or smaller head? Is it these sort of things? But it's all sort of on the basic architecture. And if we're making one, maybe we would do that too, but I would want to question everything. So for example, instead of threading onto a canister, this is probably not a good idea. This is an example of questioning it, but it's like, sure, you could have, instead of a threads, you could have how an air hose, like in air tools, sort of pull it back and it clicks on. It's heavier, so it's probably not a good idea. And if you actually did this, you'd have to make your own canisters, which would be a nightmare. But it would be kind of cool if it just sort of lift that collar up and it just clicks on and clicks off, and you didn't have the whole thread, and it was a yes or no seal instead of is it quite tight enough? And same for like the head. Like everyone's got one in the middle and they're sort of bigger or smaller. Like maybe you could have like 3 heads, like one on each fin, and they're actually aimed in, so the heat has to go all the way across the pot before it escapes out the other side. Also probably a bad idea. I'm not like saying we should do this. I'm just like, we would think all these things through, and then maybe we're not trying to change everything, but maybe there's one thing that you could actually come across and you're like, hey, maybe this one aspect, there is sort of a fundamentally better way of doing it. So an example would be our ice line trekking poles, where in most regards, they're a normal pole. Like they have a grip that's normal looking and a tip that's normal looking and normal shaft. But the one thing I did come up with and realize is that we want a 3-piece pole because it packs small. That means 2 junctions. every pole basically with 2 junctions is doing 2 adjusters. And I was like, but do we have to have 2 adjusters? Because you don't actually, and then you think about it, you're like, you don't actually need it because they go short enough with just one. And if we get rid of the second one, it's simpler, lighter, it's more reliable. All these things saves a little bit of cost. So that was something where I was like, okay, well, like, let's just put like a positive click connection that then has no potential to slip. And so and it's lighter. So we can, that's one aspect. To wrap up this long thing, what I'm saying is just question everything down to the basics, and then maybe you'll find something. Don't make it weird. Just try to find one cool thing that you could do differently. And then everything else you can just, iterate, refine. Don't get too crazy. Don't make things weird just for the sake of being weird. Like, have a good reason.
These are so great. I'm trying to think of where my follow-up question exactly wants to be, but I love these, I guess, for a series of reasons. But starting with the first one of like having a clear vision, that quiver killer backpack is awesome. Mm-hmm. And obviously we don't want to be just a consumerist mindset and just purchase 15 different backpacks for every different thing, but having a clear vision for what you want to make, and then moving into like that compromise consistently. That's such a good way to put it too, because it is so easy to think I'm gonna cut weight on this piece, but I'm gonna go burly on this piece, and that typically creates like an imbalance in that product. Mm-hmm. So having like this kind of consistent mindset or coherency, and then ask why on everything, that leads you down some really cool paths. I've been sort of playing with that concept as well in like an EDC style pack, and I've landed with some terrible ideas right now, but it's fun. It's at least it's a practice that I enjoy doing, and I hope one day it leads to a pack that I'm really proud of. Right now, it's just a weird looking thing that has terrible shaped panels, but it's a fun practice, and it's cool to ask that question.
Yeah, and for asking it, like, a hike is so good. Like, you have these things in your mind, but life's so busy, and then you go walk for like 8 hours, and then you're like, you could actually think these things through. And maybe the idea comes. You're
constantly working on so many projects. I mean, I know that compared to some companies, the amount of products you have isn't as many, but you're a small business still, and you're personally working on so many and have such a large role in all of these. Do you ever feel like you get design burnout or feel like the ideas are running thin?
Sort of. I design burnout more than thin ideas. The challenge, I think, is that I call it the valley of despair. And it's that, so you go through this process of having these great ideas, right? So you're talking about your EDC pack, you've got sort of some variables. One day you end up with this idea and you're like, I got it. Like that's the way to do this thing. And I'm stoked. And then you actually go and make it. And then you run into all the problems. If you're just iterating minor products, it's easy. But when you're trying to like actually change fundamental things, then you run into all the problems that you didn't even really expect. Maybe some good things you didn't expect too. Like with our XMID tents, the goal with I won't get into the whole layout because it's complicated, but a key goal was just headroom. And so we had the poles a certain way, and then I actually got the first sample and I was like, oh, the vestibules are actually like beside the door instead of like right in front of it, which is just something that like all tents just have the vestibule right in front of the door. And I'm like, this is actually sweet. I put my pack there, getting in and out, and the reach is shorter. So sometimes there's these like wins where something just works, but there's also problems. And that's where like the sort of first sample tends to be like, oh crap, like what did I bite off here? Because, this didn't really work. Like for example, on the X-Dome on our early samples, we didn't have a crossbar, and then all the doors were so low. It was just like awkward to use, the headroom wasn't very good. Rain would fall inside. And I was like, like half this stuff's cool and half of it sucks. And where are we going? So there's that valley of despair, and that takes it's still a grind. And whenever I start a project, I'm like, really, like, because everything's self-taught too, right? It's not like we can just like phone an expert or somebody who's done this before. It's just like, for example, right now, one thing that we're toying with is the idea of making tent stakes out of magnesium because it's structurally a lighter material. So this is like a question, everything like titanium and aluminum are actually not as strong for the weight as magnesium. So it's actually really cool. But the problem is that you need to have the right coatings, or you can like have like dust and scrapes it, it could actually end up exploding. So that's sort of a problem that you don't have. So we actually were looking at maybe making a cook pot out of it, and then all the coatings that you would use for that were like super bad for your health. So it's like, well, that's, there's this cool idea like the magnesium, but it's like, then there's a new problem too that other people aren't necessarily having to deal with. So I lost my train of thought a little bit, but basically, is it hard? The valley of despair is hard because you don't know how you commit kind of to like having to solve all these things that you don't know how to solve. Yeah. And that's hard. Ideas aren't that hard. I feel like anything, that's kind of the fun part. Anything that you really think about, at least for me, anything I really think about, not everything. Sleeping pads are things. I don't like sleeping pads, and I've been trying for like years to have a good idea for sleeping pads, and I don't have one. But
it seems like for a lot of, I'm going to use the word designers kind of just broadly, for a lot of us that want to design gear, there's no lack of ideas, just lack of answers and kind of this fatigue around like, I can't find the answer to this and I don't know where it is. And I know I've had some projects in the past that I'm still sitting on years later because I just don't have the perfect solution to what I want to happen yet. And that gets tiring maybe more than anything. Like, I think you're so right. Like I see ideas everywhere. Every time I travel, I'm in the airport, I'm like, that water bottle pocket is perfect. I love how hidden it is and it's secret and like it's in there and it's so ergonomic. And, there's like, I never have a shortage of ideas, but sometimes I don't know how to actually implement them appropriately.
It's a lot of work. It's a grind. Like it's fun if you could just be the idea person and tell other people like solve all these problems, but you got to do both.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pivot a little bit. Not that I ever want to move away from the design piece entirely, not that we will, but I want to talk about some of your newest products that have come out in the last couple of years, starting with the X-Dome. This tent came with some industry drama as well as the excitement that came with it. Why do you think this occurred, and how do you what do you think of the state of the industry now that things have settled down a little bit?
Yeah, it's complicated. I was thinking about this, and it's so multifaceted. I think on like a starting level, we have a lot of amazing like supporters and people that are stoked about our gear. So we have like that sort of baseline amount of stoke, and then we don't release a lot of stuff. So when we do release something completely new, it's like a big event. So there's already sort of some excitement compared to companies that might turn out like a whole catalog of stuff like every quarter, which is great. It's just any one piece is not going to get the attention. And then we're also big enough now that it's kind of different. Other companies target us now, which is weird. But we're always like the little guy, and it was sort of like we were trying to do our cool thing, and then all of a sudden now other companies are like making ads criticizing our products, or like you're like, oh, that's like a different position. You're sort of like, I don't say the incumbent because we're still like this tiny little like few people here just doing our thing, but that's different. And so we have other brands that they might sort of say things about our products, or they might sort of, there's all the drama, and we try to just stay out of it, but it ends up resulting in some kind of tribalism where our fans are sort of all passionate and, defending us, and the other guys' fans are sort of, believe what they've said, and the fans wage the big war and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of it. It's just like our passionate fan group who's already passionate, and then it can get inflamed a little bit. The other side of it is we are trying to make it with the X-Dome. We're trying to make a tent that is a really good overall balance. So this is back to that like trade-off, compromise consistently thing. We're not like you kind of have three variables that really trade off, which are the weight of the tent, how strong it is, and how big it is. So you can make a tent that's like big and strong if it's heavy, or that it's strong and light if it's tiny, like that sort of thing. We're trying to do really well in all three of those areas, but because you're trading off on those, you're trying to, if you think of a 3-axis thing, you're trying to grow the pie a little bit, but you're never going to max out any one of those things because you're also designing for other things. But what that means is that on any one variable, people can always find something that's better. Like there's always a tent that's lighter, and a tent that's stronger, and a tent that's bigger, and all that kind of stuff. So then people like to compare it in sort of a univariate, like a single axis sort of way, where they say, oh yeah, but like our tent's even stronger. So for example, I did a little demo, and I put some water weight on the roof, and it showed it was like 3 times as strong as like a kind of a typical tent. And then like multiple other brands like on their social media did like the same demo, and like ours is even stronger. And you're like, okay, but like your tent weighs twice as much. Like,
sure.
Like that's like, we're making a balance here.
Yeah.
So there's that. And the stormworthiness thing, there's also sort of an unintentional thing in North America, or at least in my world. We use this term called stormworthy, which I feel like a lot of my perception, it could be wrong. My perception is that it's sort of this word that just gets tossed around all the time. And it just sort of means it's like good and bad weather. But apparently in Europe, it means like a more specific thing, which means their definition of storm, they can't even really totally agree either. But for some of them, the definition of storm starts at like 100-kilometer-hour winds. So then they're taking it like we're saying, oh, this tent, you could just go pitch it in like 100-kilometer winds, like no problem. You could even like not do a very good job of setting it up and not have guidelines, and like, oh, what a fail if it broke, when I sort of had it half set up on 100-kilometer winds. So that brought some drama too, which was weird to me because we'd used that word since the beginning for other tents and nobody really got too hardcore. But we had a bunch of YouTube drama too, where, how stormworthy is it really? And it's like, it's for 98% of, people, 98% of the time it's good. But if you need something stronger, there's heavier tents. Yeah. But so there's some drama there too. And I don't know. It's a roller coaster. I don't really have a position on it. Some of it probably helps. Some of it probably hurts.
Yeah.
You just try to keep your head high and explain what you're doing and hopefully works out. And if you're wrong on something, just improve. Like we get some feedback. We added a few more guy outs on the tent that people wanted. Yeah.
Nice. Speaking of storms, can you tell us a little bit more about the waterproof construction used in the X Dome?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one for like some people that are making their own gear. So it's an awkward one because it's like sort of waterproof, and you're into this like really messy world of like customers want it to be like yes or no, and you're like, it's kind of more like a spectrum where it's kind of like, it's that awkwardness where it's like sort of waterproof. So what it actually is it's a style of seam. It's called, you could actually do it with some different types of seams, but the common one is a double DNLF, a double needle lap felled seam, which is just a bunch of layers. And one of the main things those layers do is they just avoid too much elongation on the stitch holes, because it's like, I don't know if everyone listening to this can see, but if you're pulling on the edge of a fold, like kind of like if you do this, you're pulling on the edges rather than just like pulling on a stitch hole. So the stitch holes elongate less and there's more layers. And then the secret sauce of it is that you're using a thread that expands when it's wet. So you're trying to keep the stitch holes small and then use a water expanding thread that will then expand to seal them. And it works pretty well, like at least in theory. There can be a time lag because the threads actually need to swell. So you could actually get a drip through right at the start. And then people are like, oh crap, my tent leaks. This is garbage. And then you can also have spots where there is larger stitch holes. They give you stitch back and forth a bunch of times and you get a bunch of stitches all pulling at the same spot. It makes a larger stitch hole and the thread's not going to be able to seal that. So it's not perfect. It's not something that we didn't develop it. It's something that our factory, they're really good at. They developed, and they build tents for another major brand. I won't throw them under the bus, but this was a bullet I dodged because this was like back 2021, maybe. The factory developed this seam and they told this other major brand that this was great. And the other brand was like, sweet. And they put it on all their tents, like everywhere. And I was testing it and I was like, it's got some benefits, but I don't really trust it for like really like critical areas, like above the floor or on like a flat roof. So we only did it above the vestibules, where this other brand did it everywhere. And then they ended up having to recall like all their tents for 3 years.
Oh my.
Which is like partly because they're like, we make changes quick. I think big companies move slow. So they release a tent and it goes through retailers and they collect the information data. And then maybe after a year, okay, maybe there's a problem, but we got to look. So anyways, I dodged a bullet there. They didn't have a good result with it. But there are other companies like Hilleberg, super, super well respected. They crush it. And I think they exclusively use these seams everywhere. I don't know how I don't quite understand how I don't want to say get away with it because it's got a negative term, but it's like their users are like so hardcore. And then these seams, they're good. I like them, but they're not perfect. And so you do sometimes still do like a user seam seal on the seams. And people seem okay with that. but it's just prone to drama where it's like, oh, I bought my $1,000 tent and look at this crap and that sort of thing. So that's what they are. And that they're that seam with the expanding thread. We use them on non-critical areas. So it's only seams that are above the vestibule and kind of steep. So even if water got through, it would just sort of drip at the same spot anyways. There are a couple other, like Slingfin uses them. They're a small brand, but they do an awesome job. Make some really nice tents. They use them on most of their seams, but I think they also provide some seam sealant if you want higher level. So it's back to that awkward, like, is it good enough? Yeah. And it saves the weight of seam tape and potential delamination on seam tape, but it's not perfect. It's all a trade-off.
For people listening and can't see, what Dan is sort of explaining is maybe what we would call like the French felled hybrid. Just if you only have a single needle, that's maybe kind of how you would do that. Dan, I've got a couple of questions. One, first is the observation. It's kind of funny that you mentioned Hilleberg, because that's like definitely a tent company that talks about stormworthiness. It's kind of funny to add that into the mix. But explain the thread that expands. Like, what would that look like? It's probably not a nylon thread, because you don't want it just to hold the water, but you want it to expand strategically. Like, what material is that thread, and what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And kind of the funny sort of underbelly of it is that sometimes we don't actually totally know ourselves, because we use a whole bunch of factories that are awesome at things, and they build for like really good brands, but their businesses too, and they want our business. So when they have a secret sauce, they don't totally want to tell us. Like I'm very transparent. I tell everything, but they don't really want to tell us, because if we know, then we could go to like a different factory to get our tents made. Totally. So I think it's actually a cotton thread. Okay. Huh. But I don't know that for sure.
Sure.
I don't actually know what it is, because I haven't actually asked, because it's sort of in that realm of like they developed it. And I know it would be sort of an awkward conversation to be like, tell me your secrets.
Sure. that would be awkward. That is really cool though. It's a great idea. Such an interesting concept. And like you said, pros and cons, but it's one of those things that's fun to think about. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying about asking, like, why do people do things this way? It's a cool way that they've innovated on that concept of like, okay, instead of just using Tech 70 polyester thread, let's do something different there. It's a really cool concept.
Yeah, it's cool to try things, and it's all a trade-off, and
yeah. So on your X Dome, it looks like you're using a high tenacity Silpoly. Can you tell us why you chose that? What you like about it? You've always been a big proponent of Silpoly materials over Sil Nylon in the right applications, and how has your opinion on that evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's a great question. We came out with Silpoly in 2018, which we were not the first or anything like that. We certainly wouldn't say we invented Silpoly or anything like that. But what did happen was our tents really got popular early in the sort of availability of Silpoly, and then we became the tent that was sort of best known for Silpoly. And I'm a pretty passionate guy, so then I'm there like in the online websites defending Silpoly and all that kind of stuff. It was a fun era because you had other brands that were like against it, and it was like rah rah rah, and you're all gonna die, and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of a fun little era where I ended up somehow as basically the spokesperson for Silpoly. And it's great because I feel like we won the battle. A lot of brands that that were formerly critical are now like using Silpoly. Although the victory wasn't quite as sweet as I'd hoped. I'd hoped the victory would be like this, where I proved my point and they're like, all right, fine, you're correct. We're going to change. But the victory was actually more like, oh, we still think all Silpoly sucks, except now we found one that's good. And so as if they had something special, and they were sort of right all along to reject all Silpolys until this point, and then now they've got it. And in some cases,
they're just also partially not wrong now, right?
yeah. So I'm a passionate fan of Silpoly for a couple of reasons. One is it's an observation of mine that this is back to that compromise consistently thing, that tents are kind of imbalanced because fabric strength is super important, but the actual bottleneck on a freestanding tent is usually the poles. So you will find that you would actually be better to use a bit lighter fabric and put more weight into the poles, because when a tent gets flattened, like when there's a storm rolls through, like if a storm rolls through PCT days in August and flattens the whole campground, most of the failures are bent and broken poles. They're not like the wind overwhelmed the strength of the fabric. Obviously some fabrics tear, And it's also a lot of it's collateral from the pull break, like the pull breaks and then stabs the fabric. But just the pull breaking as the initiation is actually pretty rare. So this doesn't sound like the best thing to say, but I think that outright strength of the fabric is not this like be all and end all, but it's like one variable of a bunch. And I'm a fan of not this sort of academic pursuit of ever stronger, but of good enough. And then also considering other things. So the big other things that I like with polyester is how it doesn't expand. Nylon, there's all the different formulations, so it's a big can of worms, but nylon expands about 4% when it's saturated. And that could involve gaining about 100% of its weight as it expands 4% dimensionally in its length. So 4% may not sound like a lot, but a tent could be 150 inches of fabric over the arc of a tent. So that's 6 inches of slack, which is like a seriously loose tent. And if your fly's got 6 inches of slack and it weighs twice as much, like that's a real world affects your experience problem, that it dries slower, it's loose, the fly with condensation is sticking to the interior. I perceive all these as very applied real world problems. And so I've always been willing to say, do we really need nylon? Because polyester, maybe it's actually strong enough and then it solves a lot of this. And when I actually looked into polyester, I found that a lot of the strength differences were not wrong, but they were overstated. People would compare like a sil nylon, like kind of the best of the best, to like a generic sort of doused in PU coated poly and be like, it's twice as strong or it's 3 times as strong. But when you actually compare like and like, it's a much smaller difference. Like maybe like 20% roughly. It's still, there's so many variables that make a fabric strength. And people always want to simplify it. They want to know it's like poly or nylon or if it's 15 or 20. And those are good things, but you can find exceptions to everything. And there's so many variables, like the heat treatment, how it's woven, how thick the coatings are, the thread count, but like so many different things that the fiber type is not like this massive one. It's sort of one of sort of the top 5 maybe for variables. And so we didn't find that polyester really had that much of a strength difference, and nylon loses 10% roughly when it gets wet because it expands, so the bonds are stretched. So anyways, we found to wrap it up, basically, we found that the strength difference wasn't that much and that polyester just had a better real world experience because it wasn't sagging and it was drying slower. Essentially those are the main. It was a bit more UV resistant too. So that's why I love polyester. That's kind of all we use. It's still not quite as strong for the weight. So some tents will use maybe a 10D nylon on the fly now, and we're still a 15. So there's some compromise there. It's not like exactly as good. We have to use a little bit heavier fabric to get the strength, but we think it's the best all around balance of traits.
Speaking of another fabric that's kind of been in the limelight, Challenge TNT has been quite a contentious product. What do you like or dislike about this material?
Yeah, I mean, I can say, I mean, I don't want to like criticize too much. It's not my favorite. Is the sort of the answer. I think it solves some things and it creates some other things. One of the big things it does solve is that it adds fibers on the diagonals. So in Dyneema with DCF, you just got the horizontal and vertical, so square to each other, 0-90 fibers. The TNT adds the diagonals, which is really important, but it's not that big of a deal on DCF because you can design around it. And by that, I mean, if you have a stress on the diagonal, you can put like a DCF tape over top that does align fibers with that stress. So it's a downside with DCF, the lack of diagonals, but it's not this deal breaker. And then you go to Challenge TNT, it addresses that, but all the fibers are further apart, so it becomes really hard to sew to. I know that like there's one company that uses it. They did a lot of work on seams because you can't just sew two together because your needle, with the fibers being so far apart, your needles are mostly just hitting the plastic film that's going to tear out really easily. So they reinforce all the edges and then sew them. And even there was still like some seam issues. Not so much with the fabric. It's just like hard to work with. And by the time you make it work, you've added quite a bit of weight. So it is like the current version is 0.95 ounce per yard, which is not double, but almost what the DCF we do. So it's heavier. It is nice that you can't see through it. It is nice that it has diagonal fibers, but then I don't like how far apart the fiber spacing is. That'd be the main thing, is how far apart the fiber spacing is. And also the films are thicker, so it's bulkier as well to pack. So solve some things, create some new problems. Overall, I don't think it's better than DCF. I think if somebody does want to use it, the price is lower, so that's one reason. It is a much better price. But yeah, it's different, but it's not my favorite.
I am excited to see where TNT goes, just because I think it would be good for the market for there to be an additional composite shelter material. As fantastic as DCF is, and obviously Ripstop of the Rolls very connected with both Challenge and Dyneema. I have nothing against the DCF composites at all, but I was excited to see TNT come out just because it's something different and new. And with the claim of it being kind of this cheaper composite, it's like, maybe we're getting somewhere.
They might, I think, like, so all my comments are about the current sort of version. I don't know if you guys, hopefully you guys don't have a whole warehouse full of it. No. but I do think that they've mentioned that there's been some talk that they are making some better versions. And I think one of the big things is I think they are able to get some thinner films, and they are able to use smaller fibers that are a little bit tighter. And so when they can close the fiber gap from like 1/4 of an inch to like 1/16 of an inch, that's going to really help. So if they could have a thinner film and a tighter fiber spacing and maintain the price point, then I think for me that would then start to be attractive.
Yeah, it'll be cool. We don't currently carry any TNT. We carry other Challenge products here, but we don't carry any of the TNT variants for, I guess you could say, a lot of the same reasons that you've highlighted. I'm interested and excited to see where it goes, just from a industry curiosity perspective, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And we do use their other products in our backpacks, and we like a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So wrapping up here with the X-Dome, what is one aspect that you're most proud about in this product?
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. So what I'm most proud about that is still hard for us to really communicate, so I appreciate the microphone opportunity, is... So there's a lot of confusion with our tents about what we really invented. The X-Mid was a pretty unique tent that did some new things, but it also, not everything is new. So some people just understand it as being a diagonal ridgeline on a tent. And they're like, oh, but other tents did that too. And there are some other tents that have diagonal ridgelines. What people have a harder time understanding is the X-Mid's more than that, because it also has not just a diagonal ridgeline, but a diagonal floor. So other tents with a diagonal ridgeline were still a rectangle floor, square to the end walls. The X-Mid comes up with what you might call a double diagonal. But if we just look at the floor, so this is the actual answer is the floor plan. And that's because we found a way to make a tent work in a simpler shape. So it's back to the first principles of like, do tents have to be these 6, 7, 8-sided shapes? Could we make a tent that still has vestibules and everything in a rectangle? And we were able to do that by putting the floor on a diagonal in a parallelogram shape. So it's a really unique floor plan for a tent that is no one had ever done it. I'm pretty sure no one has, because I've been living and breathing that thing for like 7 years, and nobody's come up with that older example of a tent yet. So I'm pretty stoked that floor plan really is a unique and beneficial invention. And then we have used that in the X-Dome as well. So the X-Dome is a freestanding tent. It doesn't have a ridge line. It doesn't really have anything in common with those older diagonal ridgeline tents, but it does have the floor plan, which is really what makes it all work. And then that's the big sort of thing that we've changed, and everything else is more like good judgment, coherent design, trying to like execute well and make good trade-offs, compromise consistently. But the big first principles idea is the floor plan.
There's I think a larger philosophy here, which is you have to really dig into products to understand how great they are. Not every product is going to hit you across the face with like, boom, that's obviously a new thing. You know, like a pack example, I guess, is like the Mystery Ranch Tri-Zip. That's like a very novel opening concept for a bag, and hadn't been done really that much before that. But not every product is going to be something that obvious, and it's really important to dig into kind of the nitty gritty and the geometry, the panel layout, some of these things that feel a lot more obscure in design.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And sometimes the best ideas get out of the way, and they just work, and they maybe don't smack someone in the face. But when you like actually come to appreciate like the elegant simplicity of how it works, you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to pivot from the X-Dome a little bit over to the Wapta pack. So I want to talk about this one. Something I'm really excited to ask, because I want to ask about the ALUULA Durlyte, just to get that out of the way immediately. They don't work with distributors. So if you're listening right now and you're wondering why we don't carry this or why I'm so curious about this, they don't work with us, which is okay, totally within their right. So I don't know much about it. I know they have a tight grip on what you're able to say and how much you're able to say, but what do you like about this material, and what have you seen after sending a lot of the Waptas out for a while now?
Yeah, good question. I think I did sign an NDA, but I don't really remember what it said. So. Yeah. So yeah, their strategy is sort of like Gore-Tex, where they want to be intentional about their partnerships, and I think there actually is, I think, a pretty good argument for it, in the sense that what they don't want, they see a lot of benefit to their material if it's built right, with taking advantage of some of the properties. But if you just sort of slap it in and use the same old construction methods, a lot of the advantages don't shine. So they're trying to work with partners that will have the resources to take advantage of it more. Kind of like Gore-Tex, I think, is the best example. That's kind of how they see themselves. It's possible that they change. I have no idea what sort of their long-term plan is. They probably still just figuring out as they go too. But I think at least in the early years when they're getting started, they want to be more selective. And also probably the realistic is probably not like they have a smaller accounts may just not be worth it for them. They're a pretty small team, so they probably would be hard for selling minimum quantities and things like that. I know they have like a pack that just came with Arc'teryx, who probably buys a ton of material. So ALUULA has a bunch of fabrics, and the neat thing about ALUULA is that they have found a way to actually chemically bond a film to, we'll say, like ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. We'll just call it PE for short. So they found a way to take a weave of this fancy PE that's quite durable, that people would best know as the brand name Dyneema. Take the weave of that and also stick a film to it. So with other packs, like hybrid DCF, you've got some Dyneema in there, but it's not dominantly. It's a polyester weave. And then with Challenge Ultra, it's a great fabric. We use it. They mix in polyester so that they can make things stick. Those are both using glues. Whereas ALUULA is just basically two parts. It's a weave and it's a film. And I'm allowed to say this part because I just figured this out myself. They didn't tell me this. I think the secret sauce, here we go. I think the secret sauce is that I think they chemically modify the surface of the film to melt at a slightly lower temperature. It's all PE, so it all melts at about the same temperature, but they modify part of it to melt a little bit sooner. And then, this is just a theory. I don't know this to be true, but I think they modify it to melt a little bit sooner, because the problem, if you melt the ultra high molecular weight PE, there's all these long chemical chains, and if you melt it, you break them all and you lose all the strength. Even if they're still there, they're all broken. So you don't want to melt it, and you don't want to degrade the chains. But what they can do is just take like a surface coating between the film and the weave, and they can, I think, melt that together. I'm not sure. That's just a guess about how they do it. But the bottom line is what they accomplish is that they stick it all together. And so the whole thing is just pure PE, which is basically theoretically as strong as possible, because those are basically the strongest available fibers. It's also, there's no glue, so it can be fully recyclable. It's still like a bunch of other components. Like if you make a backpack with that, but you've got a million other components, it's maybe hard to recycle still, but the potential is there. And also, you can do not just they can join the film to the weave, but you can also build things that way. You can make like melted seams essentially. And it's hard to do because the temperature windows are really, really narrow. Whereas like TPUs that people might use for, I don't know, like a big commercial raft or something like that. I've never worked with them, but my understanding is they have a much bigger window for the temperature. You sort of get the temperature somewhere in this ballpark and it melts and you're good. Whereas with ALUULA, if you go a little bit too hot, you probably wreck everything, and a little bit too cold and it doesn't stick. So it's like a much more precision thing where maybe, Susie in her garage is not going to have a good outcome if she's just sort of got the Walmart hand iron trying to make it work or something like that. I built a life jacket once with like TPU, like with like a Walmart iron. Yeah. And I don't think it would go well with ALUULA just because of the degree of precision that you need. So it is a really cool fabric. It's got so much potential. So they make a few different versions. And I don't totally have them all straight in my own head, but the Durlyte is one of the better known ones. It's, I think, got a film on both sides. It feels like that. It's kind of a slicker feeling, and the weave's sort of stuck in the middle. And then the main fabric we use is Graphite, which is just a film on one side. So you have a little bit more of a normal weave feeling. We use both on the backpack. So we liked its potential. It's really cool. It's also at the same time, the downsides are that it's hard to work with because all the methods you're basically developing. You're not like able to just take your toolkit of, I know how to sew, so I can just, like, you could sew it.
Yeah.
It's fine. You would have a good outcome with it, but it's nice because it's edge stable. Like the seam strength is really good. So you can actually have quite a good result just sewing it, but you're not taking full advantage of it if you're not doing some of these other things. And we're not there. It's a whole journey of what's possible with the construction. So we do some bonding, but we just do some sewing too, and trying to work fancy over time.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, I don't know, other than just like what you can find on a website, it's hard to find information about it, again, for reasons that are understandable. So it's really cool to hear more about it. Would you say there's a material that is similar to the Graphite or Durlyte? Is it most similar to Ultra 100, 200, or is there kind of nothing like it out there right now?
I think the closest things out there that I am just learning about and haven't used are, I think Challenge has a new fabric that is a 100%. So Challenge Ultra is like about 2/3 this PE with a film, but they're using some glue to put it together, and it works because it's partly polyester on the face. Yep. I think they have a new fabric. I forget what it's called, but I think it is 100%. So maybe they have like a better glue or something. Sure. It's still glue based, and I think the film is still not PE, so it's still dissimilar materials. It's not going to be recyclable. It's going to put some weight in the glue, so that's weight that's not in making it more durable or something like that. But it could be very close. It's not like the glue weight is some astronomical number. Sure. And then probably even closer, that's exciting in fabric news, is the new fabric from Dyneema, which was announced at the Functional Fabric Fair like 2 weeks ago, roughly. I haven't even seen the specs on it yet. I just know it was at the fair and they're sending us some samples. But that is, my understanding is it's going to be more of a pure PE fabric too. And they do like a super nice job on everything they make. So I'm excited to see what they come up with. I expect it's probably a face weave that's PE and still the glue, but probably executed really well. So I'm excited to see what that's like. And so you guys might probably, I think it's not available. They have one customer who's got an exclusive on it this year. And then I think it's going to be widely available early next year. So it might be something that people are really using in 2026.
Cool. Yeah. I love how much you're in it. I mean, I think it was a different podcast that you did. They called you like the fabric nerd. And that can only be a term of endearment on Ripstop on the record. So it's fun to chat with somebody that's so into it and appreciates all the things. Okay, now I want to mention a more niche part of your pack. So going down from the material down to the daisy chain. You have a really interesting kind of material used on the daisy chain that's sort of this, from pictures, I haven't actually gotten my hands on it myself. It looks like some sort of TPU like coated thing with laser cut or CNC cut holes in it. It's really nifty. It's really sleek. Why'd you choose that over just a more standard like woven daisy chain?
Yeah, actually I have one right here. So it's for people that are watching the video, you could see one. This pack's not inflated, so it's not as pretty, but we make this, I'll explain what it is in a sec, but we make this and sort of on the four corners of the pack. So it's there too, the strings attached to it. And then it's also something similar aesthetic on the shoulder straps. So what we're trying to do there, so that is ALUULA Durlyte. The actual version is HH190. Durlyte's sort of their film on both sides. It doesn't really feel like film. It feels like this tough stuff. This tough sort of plastic sandwich with fibers in it. We're trying to do a few different things there. So the way we build it is I'll say what it's for and then I'll say how we build it. So what it's for is we're trying to do something similar to a daisy chain, but webbing, when you're like nerding out on super light, webbing is actually like decently heavy. And it doesn't really add much structure to a pack because webbing's pretty limp. So what we're trying to do is make something that accomplishes that function of being able to have like all sorts of different attachments and rig things of how you want, but in a way that's lighter and adds a little more stiffness to the backpack. So we do that with ALUULA Durlyte HH190. 190 is just the GSM, the weight of it, 190 grams per square meter. It's hard to make. What we do is one layer was not thick enough. And if you put like a cord in a hole, you'd sort of deform the hole. It would kind of leave an ugly permanent stretch. So we needed 2 layers. So what we ended up doing is we laser cut out these sort of like butterfly wings that you're going to fold together. We laser cut that out and we cut all the holes in it. And we laser etch a little groove down the center so that we can fold it. And so we fold it shut like a book. And then we bond it. We heat press it. So it's 2 layers stuck together. By etching and folding, we don't have a sharp edge. You could just like take 2 layers and bond them, but you'd have sort of a sharper edge if you actually cut it. Yep. So the fold really makes it smooth. And then we still sew that into the seam. Theoretically, we could bond it into the seam, which would be super cool. But it's like really hard to do. So it's a neat detail. I like how, aside from the function that I mentioned, how visually because they're black on the 4 corners, it defines the shape. And so you can see the backpack, and it's not just a sea of sort of monotonous color. So I think they're a cool detail. I think it's fun because it opens up a lot of potential for how people use the backpack. And it's just a neat example of what you can do with ALUULA, how you can, it's all edge stable, right? If you like laser cut holes in most other backpack fabrics, you just have these frayed holes and you couldn't fold and heat bond. And there's so much you could do. Like the sky's the limit with some of these ALUULA materials.
I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with your answer because I hate it because as a DIYer, there's like no way I can replicate that. And that makes me frustrated. But also one thing I love about it from a design perspective is that it opens up, you've managed to deliver modularity without adding really additional weight or problem areas on the pack, which is cool. I mean, you've added these daisy chains, like you mentioned, basically all 4 seams on the shoulder straps, but it's like a streamlined, aesthetic, and functional piece that doesn't just like add needless stuff, which is normally what like highly modular pack adds. So it's a really cool design, which is why I wanted to ask. I mean, the daisy chain's a weird thing to ask about with like all the things that you do, but it's a really neat piece. I really like it.
Yeah, thanks. It's my favorite part of the pack too.
The main body of the pack has no stretch mesh pockets at all. Tell us the reasoning behind that decision, or does this go back to what you called the first principles design?
Yeah, good question. I have sort of a love-hate, complicated relationship with stretch materials. I have this is like another great example of trade-offs and that sort of thing. So the problem with a lot of stretch materials is that if they're really stretchy, there can be durability issues. I had a backpack that I hiked the PCT with. It was great, great backpack. But by the end of the PCT, you've got like a whole bunch of gashes, and the stretch mesh was the first thing to go. And I've had a few backpacks like that where the stretch mesh is the first thing to go. Part of that's because those are pretty light meshes. Like they're like a lycra mesh. People might call them a Darlington mesh. I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but they're pretty light, like 4-way stretch mesh. They're not really that similar to some of the tougher stretch meshes. I think there's like the Dyneema stretch mesh, and I think there's a Challenge product now too that are quite a bit heavier. So there's kind of 4 ways you could go. There's like classic stretch meshes that are pretty light and not that durable, but they're sweet for volume because you can just like cut a square. The construction's dead simple. You just cut a flat square of it, and it's all of this volume comes from the stretch. Simple to do. It's cheap. It's light. It's just durability is an issue. Then you go to the thicker, tougher meshes and you solve some of that durability, but they're not as stretchy. So then you're thinking maybe about adding volume with the design. So adding pleats or a 3-dimensional shape in some way to create more volume. Not necessarily, but sort of if you really want a nice amount of pocket, you probably need to do that. Then you have non-stretch meshes, which is what we use in our Kako backpacks. It might be called like a knit mesh or a bullet mesh. There's still sort of some mechanical stretch, like you can sort of deform it, but the fibers aren't like a lycra that you could really stretch. So then you're definitely going to have to create volume with pleats and maybe a 3-dimensional shape. That works fine. And especially, I still don't totally trust the knit meshes in really high wear spots, like side pockets, that sort of thing. So what I've tended to do is we side towards the durability side of things on backpacks more so. So I like to use what I call a protected elastic, where it's inside the hem instead of strapped along the top edge. And I also like to use a solid fabric. And so you'll see all of our side pockets are a solid, like reasonably tough fabric with the elastic inside. And then for the front pocket, it's a little less exposed. So I would use a low stretch, like a Dyneema mesh, or I use a bullet mesh. Like we don't actually use a Dyneema mesh, but I'm open to it. The bullet meshes are what we use mostly on those backpacks. And then for the Wapta, I would still sort of have a similar position, except the Wapta is trying to be super light. And the thing that people don't totally realize is that the meshes that are actually tough enough are actually pretty heavy. I think like a Venom, is that because a Venom mesh?
Yep.
Do you guys, what does it weigh? Do you guys know? You must know. You got all the weights memorized, right?
Yeah, it's currently 5.1 ounces.
5 point per square yard.
Yeah.
And then you multiply that by what, 34 to get GSM?
I can look it up because I definitely don't know the conversion off the top of my head.
Yeah, I forget it too, but it's so I think if we stay an ounce per yard, you guys that's about 5. And then the ALUULA fabric that we use is about 2. And those, so what you'll find is that the stretch meshes are they have good properties, but they're heavier. So when you're trying to make a super light backpack, if you can take a non-stretch material and create volume 3-dimensionally with pleats and folds, then you can use a lighter material. And so we use the ALUULA, the Graphite V98. So it's 98 GSM, which I think maybe that's 3 ounces per yard, not 2, but I'd have to actually do the number, but it's around 3. So it saves us some weight. So that's really the reason, is that we do want to use a more durable fabric. So the Lycra meshes are out, and then out of the durable ones, this is actually the lightest option.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I just pulled up the product page here. It's 172 GSM. So yeah, right. Compared to 90, that's
98. Yeah, so it's almost half the weight. Yeah. So I mean, it's when a pack's only 400 grams, maybe that's it's a piece of it.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. That's a good explanation. Plus, there's definitely some design benefit to having those pockets have some static. The load carrying ability with the static material is just different. The stretch is a benefit, of course, but if you're putting water bottles and whatnot in a side pocket, it can be nice to have a bottom end, like a bottom end in terms of the stretch or like the amount of dynamic load that pocket can take. And that's just something you're not going to get with a stretch mesh at all. I've joked about wanting like a Newtonian stretch pocket, like the more weight it holds, the more structure it has, but like it can stretch indefinitely, something like that. Obviously not possible, but it's fun to dream about.
Yeah, that would be neat to have that relationship. Yeah, it's a good point. There's some interesting trade-offs. Like one downside is that you can't see into it as well. People like how you could see into a mesh pocket. You can sort of tell what's there. We have to laser cut drain holes where that's just going to drain water. But yeah, it does have high strength and smooth things like lower weight.
Yeah. You mentioned Ultra already, but you guys continue to use Ultra 200X on some materials. What do you like, or some of the products rather, what do you like about Ultra 200 versus Ultra 100X, especially considering in the past, and even in this episode, you've talked about sort of academic numbers and then real life numbers. On the spec sheet, Ultra 100X has really impressive durability. Obviously 200X is even more, but it's, Ultra 100 is extremely light as well. So what's your decision look like there with the trade-offs between those two materials?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we use almost entirely 200X. We use a little bit of 400X. What we found there is that with the Ultra 200X, we're having good results with it, but it's not like insanely durable like you might think from the specs. We do see it's more durable if we see a benefit. We don't see it being like wildly more durable.
Sure.
Where I come from there is we had some wear points on my first backpack where there was sort of after 500 miles or 1,000 miles, you start to see wear, and you're like, oh well, if this pack changes to Ultra, it's going to be like, if it's 10 times as durable, now it takes like 5 or 10,000 miles, and it's like, well, and it didn't really pan out like that. It was like, actually, you still need to like actually maybe redesign these vulnerable points on your backpack because it might last longer, but it's still like, it's not like revolutionary change. So we started with 200X. I don't think 100X was out yet. And we still had some quirks in our backpacks, like in sort of my side of things on the design that were vulnerabilities in the backpack that we had to work out. And we got the backpack to a good place where now I think it's quite dialed in, but I don't really want to go less durable than that with the 100. Just sort of intuitively, I feel like it's in a pretty good place. It's not like I'm against it. I just feel like we're sitting in a pretty sweet spot right now. I am tempted to change parts of the backpack, like the roll top, which I'm like, that definitely does not need to be as beefy as it is. And then this is not totally like a Dan Durston answer for this one, because I'm very I'm like a function guy. So I'm like, whatever works, like give me the math, and that's what we're doing. But this is aesthetics on the top, which are important to me too. And the problem with the 100 is just that the color doesn't match. And I but it's sort of match. I'm sort of like, they
Totally
both have
fair.
a gray, and I don't want it
Yep.
to just be sort of like it sort of matches, but it doesn't
Yeah.
quite match.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, it just, to me, the aesthetics aren't good. So, but I don't want to make the whole pack in 100X. So then I'm like, well, we could contrast it. We could just go like black or something for the roll top, which you could do. And like, it could happen. But I just sort of, then I'm like, well, we're actually adding seams to put that on there because we have some panels that run right to the top right now. So I'm like, if we change it to 100, we add all these seams, we've saved like 10, 15 grams or something. It's not that much. And then now we have a pack that maybe doesn't look as good and it's more complicated to build and has an extra failure point. And so I would like to save more weight. That hasn't quite been there for me.
So as we're wrapping up here, we just have a few questions left for you, but thank you for sharing all of your knowledge around both the Wapta and also the X-Dome. I know that our listeners are going to be pretty psyched to hear all of that. And I think her last questions are pretty fun too, some standards, but and then some, looking forward, we're excited to hear from you about future things. But first, right here, there's a lot of gear companies that look to you for inspiration, like you mentioned, doing the water test on your tent, and other tent companies kind of taking notice of that and doing the same thing. What gear companies do you look at for inspiration?
Yeah, there's some amazing companies out there. It's such a cool world of people doing amazing things. The attributes of a company that really resonate with me as cultivating respect are there's a few things. I think there's really 4. One is innovation. Like, are they actually like making unique stuff? Second is quality, because I just like, it's just, if you care about your gear, it has to be high quality. And then a third one is community, which is weird because it's not really about the gear, but I feel like if you're really passionate about what you do, you should be kind of cultivating a community around it and like be a part of the community and listening and feedback. And so community is the third one. And the fourth one is longevity. Because I think, so there's sort of one-hit wonders and things like that. But when a company has been like executing on these things for a long period of time, that's really what stands out to me. So a few examples of companies that I really think are awesome. One is kind of a weird answer. One is Thermarest. It sounds weird because I think of them as sort of big and corporate, but I'm like they came out of nowhere with the original sleeping pad in like 1970. Like complete innovation. And then even like they've been around for 50 years. So like the longevity is there, and there's still like the Neo Air, like 15 years ago, like again, completely changed how sleeping pads are made. They're always innovating. They don't get as good a marks for kind of community because I'm sure they do great things. I just don't I think of them as more of like a big corporate brand, but for like quality, innovation, and longevity, they score really high. And then another brand I like is Alpaca Raft, who scores really high on all these things. Like every good innovation in pack rafting comes from them. They've been crushing it for maybe 30 years. They're such a part of the community, like everybody, they sponsored the events, all kind of stuff. And then one last one would be Hilleberg, who just they have a great community. Their fans are like, I hear like there was a YouTube video this week or last week that was like Durston and Hilleberg have the most like rabid fans. And it's like, you can't say anything negative about their products or their fans attack you. So I sort of know what it's like, but the passion that their community has is amazing, and they've been crushing it for like so much longer than we have. And I would love to be able to look back in 30 years and be like, hey, we did cool things for as long as they did one day. So yeah, then they've innovated so much on different niche, like more like severe weather tents, but really, really great company.
That's a great list. It spans such a variety of industries, products, concepts. And I mean, to bring it back to Hilleberg again, it's kind of cool because that's known as a family company, sort of similar to Durston as well, which is just kind of a neat crossover there in terms of like who you look up to and how you guys are seen, I think, as well. What could you tease for us? I mean, I don't want you to push you into a corner to talk about any crazy secrets or whatever, but can you tell us about things that you're working on? I mean, I know you mentioned like the cook pot or the stove, but what sort of things are you playing with and designing right now?
Yeah, so it's tricky because any product you make still has like a not maintenance, but you're to do it well, you're obligated to keep innovating and improving on it. So you've got like all these products you want to keep the ball rolling, and you're going to get more balls rolling. So we have all our current products still get updates. Like the X-Mids have been out for 7 years now, and we had like a Gen 3 that came out this year for those. The X Dome line, we just launched the 2-person 3 or 4 weeks ago. And so we're still just starting that lineup. We'd like to get, so fleshing that lineup out, which would be like DCF tents, maybe more of a winter version eventually too. And then aside from that, we're like, well, I guess all our current products are constantly getting updates. So like our trekking poles, we're still updating them. Our backpacks, we're still updating them. There's going to be like a 2026 model, all that kind of stuff. For actual new stuff, what I would really love to do is, and I haven't really actually made that much progress on it, but with the ALUULA backpacks, I would really love to just like really take advantage of it. It's so hard. That's kind of why it hasn't really been happening, because it's like, to build that thing requires tools that, like you guys said, you don't have the ability. Like I don't really have the ability. We're like, we got to, I just bought a heat press last week. I'm like, nice. I don't know how to use it. Right. I'm going to like turn it on and burn something and, learn just like anybody would. So I would love to make a backpack that is just like, so like sophisticated, like but like in a very elegant way, not in just like we nerded out and complicated everything, but in just like, for example, I would like this backpack would be probably stitchless on at least the main compartment. Everything would be fused. So it wouldn't just, the waterproofness that we sort of talked about earlier, it would be just like, there'd be no sort of asterisks on it. It would just be like, you could fill this bag with water and like carry it. If you wanted to carry 100 pounds on the trail, you could just do that. So anyways, that's the dream, but whether we can execute that, I don't know. And then I would like to make kind of any product where when I contemplate the first principles, I'm like, oh, that's a cool idea. So with tent stakes, we might be able to pull off the magnesium ones. It's early days. Like I don't have a prototype or anything like that, but we might be able to do magnesium tent stakes. It's going to be a minor product, but it's kind of a nerdy, fun one. And then the other things that I would love to improve on, sleeping pads, I just like got to improve on because I just don't really like any of them. I just don't know what the problem is either. So I'm like, I just like need to go for a long walk in the woods and think about like pressure points and distribution and all that and see if we can come up with something. And same with sleeping bags and quilts. I do have an idea that I'm pretty excited about that's pretty unconventional. So that's, again, I haven't started work on it. So it's a while off, but I think there's something cool there. So that's what we hope to do. And that's, again, the valley of despair lies between where I am today and all those products. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if it's something you're working on, then it will be great whenever it comes, no matter how long that takes.
Hopefully.
Since we last talked to you, Dan, we've sort of included this flagship question that we've got to ask a lot of people. So I'm really excited to hear your take. So don't let us down. No, but the question is, what fabric is missing on the market in your opinion?
Yeah. Okay, so I have two amazing fabrics that don't exist. First one, I would like an ultra high molecular weight polyethylene like that is suitable for like apparel, like hiking pants specifically. A lot of these fabrics have like films and things like that, which you wouldn't want on a pair of pants to be uncomfortable. It would have to have a like breathable, a really nice hand. Because I do a lot of bushwhacking, I always shred my hiking pants. And if you can make this in all different weights. You can make like a lighter hiking shirt that's more durable, pants. You could do like, if you could make it in crazy light weights, you could make sleeping bag shells and down jacket shells, all different weights. I mean, you need to be downproof for some of those lighter ones, but like a nice hand fabric that actually takes advantage of the higher strength to weight and brings that to these other applications. And then the second one is not really a fabric, but it relates to fabric. And that is, this would be amazing, a seam tape that works on silicone. So in the tent world, you've got all these fabrics where silicone is the strongest coating, and companies will silicone on both sides, but then you can't seam tape. So then all the users have to seam seal, which is kind of messy and people hate it. Or you have to use other coatings on one side so you can seam tape, which is fine, but it's not as strong. So if somebody made, and there might exist 3M, so you should check this. 3M lists a few tapes in their catalog that work on sil. I haven't tried them. But if there actually was a seam tape that could be like reliably applied to silicone, it would change the tent world, because then everyone would just use sil fabrics, and all these sort of mixed coating fabrics wouldn't make sense anymore.
I like both of these so much. It reminds me, the UHMWPE apparel concept reminds me of when DSM still owned Dyneema, how they had the DSM cycling team like on their pro tour, and all of their jerseys and stuff, the jerseys and bibs were like laced with Dyneema, and they talked all about how like it's improving rider safety, because like when you crash your bike going 60 kilometers an hour, you can mess yourself up pretty good. but we never really saw that turn into anything. And I feel like that technology has to still be out there, and I hope somebody's working on it, because I agree that would be awesome. And for trail running, for scrambling, for rock climbing, there are so many applications where UHMWP laced apparel seems to just make sense, but it hasn't really made its way out there yet.
Yeah, I've seen samples of like jeans, like not for ultralight, but like jeans that are laced with it that are supposedly way more durable, and also merino base layers. Which, because merino is awesome, but it does sort of sag and stretch, and that with the Dyneema lace, it like holds its shape, and it's pretty cool. But nobody's got it on market.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that. I don't know when that's coming out because we don't have anything like that right now either. But it sounds great.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Cool. Well, Dan, this has been just as good as I hoped. Thanks for sharing a bit more than an hour with us today. And we're really excited to see what you do. I mean, it's always exciting. We love your products and love to see what you guys do, especially just feeling so organic. The way that you run your company feels very authentic. Seeing yourself respond to comments is reassuring. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds us makers that you can do great things without having to be in that like corporate-y world. So thank you for doing what you're doing and leading the industry and obviously hopping on the pod with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm stoked to be here and just so appreciative of everybody that supports us and makes it happen. Like we have amazing fans and staff and partners, and like so it all just makes it happen. Yeah,
awesome, cool. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks guys. See you.